Hello and welcome to the Good Mornings podcast, where we talk about everything from tacos to tech, dirt to diamonds. My name is Dante Weik. I, of course, am your host. Most of you know me more as Dante than anything else. I am once again joined by Dr. Ronald Raymond Weik the First. He has a PhD in microbiology, PhD in hilarious family stories, and he's the author of 3 books. One not best-selling, but an absolutely fantastic book on self-improvement, financial advisory book, and, of course, a wonderful, wonderful book on politics, which we will not be discussing because I don't want anybody in the comments to be getting angry at my opinions. So welcome back on the podcast.
Good morning, everybody. I've got to tell you this story that is an ongoing story. Yeah, we had animals on the farm, and we had goats. Goats were a lot of fun because they were big enough and strong enough they could pull your wagon. So you had a stick with a carrot, and you put the carrot out in front of the goat, and the goat would think it could catch the carrot.
Like in Minecraft. If you guys have ever played Minecraft, you can ride a pig with a saddle with a carrot on a stick. Yes, that's a thing you can do, by the way.
Yeah, so those goats would go for the carrots, and they'd walk towards it, but you'd keep it ahead of it, and you got your wagon tied to the back of it, and they'd pull you along. So we had a great time with animals. We had sheep and cows. Everybody had their own cow.
You had sheep.
And you hear about these cow tipping parties. They didn't exist back at that time. We just had our cows, and we protected them and fed them.
Potentially tip them.
Yeah, no, we didn't try to tip cows. They were our cows, and so we had. But one thing we would do with it is we'd sit up on the side of the hill, and it wasn't just an ordinary hill; it's the side of a mountain. And my brother and I had a bow and arrow that we wanted to test out. It was a big, full-size bow. We could barely string the thing, and it would take 2 of us to get the string on there, and then you'd pull that back with feathers, the arrows and the sharp points on the ends, and we had a nice sheath of them, and would shoot them down into the pasture. Well, what would you rather shoot at more than anything is a moving target, to hone your skills. Well, who do you think is moving around down in the pasture? Nothing but these cows, our cows, and we're shooting at the cows. Well, fortunately, my dad was at work, and he never found out about that.
However, if he did, I think he would have put your asses to ashtrays.
And we were lucky that we didn't hit any, because can you imagine my father coming home and finds this cow with an arrow sticking in its side?
Mark, why is my cow being shot by Indians?
Yeah, we wouldn't be here to tell about it, I guarantee that. But one of the most interesting animals that we had was this rooster.
We'll call him Cocky McGee. How about that?
Yeah, this rooster was, he was head of all the chickens that were there. He was the meanest, biggest, baddest rooster you've ever seen. And we were little kids. We were only about, 5 and 6. And
bow and arrow?
Yeah, we had bows and arrows. In fact,
The 60s was a different time, man. When you could trust kids with high-power weaponry,
The only job that I had as a 5-year-old, because I wasn't going to school yet, was I had to go get the cows every day and then bring them back to the barn. So they'd spend the night in the barn, and next morning my dad would let them out before he went to work. Well, one time I was out with the dog. I always had the dog with me looking for the cows. Well, 100 acres, you don't realize how big 100 acres is. You can get lost. Not that I was lost, but the cows were. And we couldn't find them, the dog and I. We couldn't find them. And, I'm only 5 years old, so I'm walking all over the farm trying to find these lousy cows. There's about 15 of them, and you'd think they'd make up a racket and you could follow their footsteps. And the dog was a good tracker, and he could find anything. We could not find those cows, not for the life of us. Most days we found them, but this particular day, those cows were nowhere to be found. So finally, I gave up, and I went back to the house and pretended I'd gotten the cows and went into the house, and I'd done my job for the day. Well,
again, can you believe this man has a PhD?
My dad comes home, and I had made one crucial error, the biggest mistake I had made in a year of 5 years of living, and that was I forgot to close the barn door. So my father comes home, and the first thing he notices, oh, look at that, the barn door is open. Those cows are going to get out. So he goes in there.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
He goes in there, no cows. Well, now he wants an explanation. Where are the cows?
Well, I left the barn door open.
Yeah,
So
well,
I must have gotten out.
I was in big trouble. So I finally confessed that's the safest thing to do when your life's on the line.
I think he would have been killed. I don't think your father would have actively, like, you just picture him turning into the Doomslayer, just grab you by the neck, rip your head off. I don't think he would have done that. But he might have.
It was pretty scary. So so he says, all right, we're going out to look for the cows. And it was raining and it's dark. Well, that's the worst time to be looking for cows, in the dark and the rain. But we had the dog with us, and of course he's with us too, and we're out looking around. We couldn't find the cows. They're nowhere to be found, so we finally go back. We had dinner. And it was the next morning, I believe, that the local farmer, another local farmer, about a mile, not that my dad was a farmer, we were kind of like gentlemen farmers. You know, he had a full-time job as a scientist, engineer. But this local farmer who had a bunch of cows and bulls and things like that,
he's like, that ain't my cow.
He says, oh, I found your cows wandering along the road. So apparently they had gotten out, had left our property, and had decided to go for a walk. And sure enough, they
for a nice evening walking, walking holiday.
There they are walking along. Somebody's lost their cows.
He's just sitting there. Man, someone lost a whole herd of cows.
So
someone must let their kid do a job.
So he brings them back, and they get put back in the. I think at that time they were let out in the field, but we had to go mend the fences because they had. You don't know where they get out. You have to check every single inch of fence to see where it is that they got through.
Because obviously it's somewhere. I mean, they didn't just teleport. I mean,
and the fence it runs through the woods, so it could be a tree fell on top of the fence. It could be anything that allowed them to get through. Cows go wherever they want, and
at least when they're given the option.
But one thing that was funny about the cows is that sometime we used to keep them in. There was a yard between the garage and the house, and the garage was down the hill, and it was a good ways away. It was probably 100. This is where the story comes in. The other story, where it was a couple hundred yards away from the house, several hundred, and a big field in there, and we'd turn the cows loose there. It was like a pasture. And we didn't put up big fences, though. We just put up an electric fence. So my dad would get the thing energized and then turn the cows loose and then would watch the cows. And they'd work their way across the field, feeding their way across, big noses. And, of course, there cow pies everywhere. But, fertilizes the lawn and would watch them. And we'd see them, put their tail straight out. I didn't know they could do that, but they'd put their tail straight out, a cow's tail, which I always thought was, for flapping flies. But in reality, they actually put it straight out, and that way they can,
release the hounds.
Yeah, well, they urinate, and they also, they defecate, and they drop these giant cow pies. And you let them dry up, and then you'd put them in the garden, and stuff would grow like crazy. Yeah, we had gardens. And
it's like if you've ever played Minecraft, it's like bone meal.
Yeah, exactly. They were just, they were very fertile. And the cucumbers, tomatoes, beans, it's amazing.
I don't think they were cucumbers anymore. I think they were
what we would get out of that garden. So anyway, what we'd do is we'd wait for the cows to work their way over to the electric fence because we wanted to see what would happen. It's just one string of wire, but it was energized. So they'd work their way over, and of course their noses are out front because that's what they're doing. They're chewing the grass and they're working their way. Well, eventually they'd get over to that electric fence, and the lead cow. There's always someone in the front. There, even in a herd of 15, there's always someone who's like a little bolder, looking for the greener grass on the other side of the fence, and that's what he was doing. And he'd hit that fence with his nose, and he would jump up in the air, all 4 feet off the ground. It was the most hilarious thing you've ever seen. Because that thing was charged. You had to have it charged. It was a big animal, and you wanted to teach it a lesson. So that thing is up in the air, and its legs start going because it's already
like Scooby-Doo or something.
It's already running to get out of there, but it hasn't landed yet. It hasn't landed yet. Well, the next thing you see is there's a stampede because the rest of the cows know something as bad has happened, and they're following this lead cow, trying to make their way to the other side of the field, get as far away as they can from this electric fence. And they finally get to the other fence. They settle down, and they go back to feeding. And then it starts over again. But this time there's a new lead cow. So you can imagine the amount of fun we would have watching these cows. They're not the brightest creatures in the world, but they're fun to watch. All right, so the other animal that we had tons of fun was this rooster.
And fun in air quotes, right?
This rooster, it was the meanest rooster you'd ever seen in your life. And I think one of the reasons it got so mean is that we would feed it corn. We would husk the corn on the side of on the fields there. After a lot of the corn was collected, there was still plenty of corn cobs laying around, and we'd go collect all those, and then we would rub them off with our hands. Your hands would get sometimes had to wear gloves because your hands get raw from breaking the kernels off, and then we'd throw these kernels out to the chickens and ducks. We had ducks too. Well, we always felt that the rooster was getting off because everybody would get out of the way of the rooster. So we thought the rooster was kind of hogging it. So we'd kind of kick it out of the way a bit. And the ducks would come in, and the ducks were like vacuum cleaners. You know how they quack? Well, they scoop also. And they scoop along the ground like vacuum cleaners, like almost like, what is that game that everybody plays? Pac-Man. Yeah, exactly right.
Like Happy Hippos?
Yeah, Pac-Man, where you're gobbling up these little kibbles, which are little corn, corn pieces.
From Pac-Man.
Yeah, exactly right.
That must be what it is. Pac-Man's a duck, and the ghosts are roosters.
Yeah.
Or Pac-Man's a rooster, and the ghosts are ducks.
But in any case, this rooster was a very mean rooster by nature, and they tend to be, kind of mean because they dominate the herd, of chickens. Or flock.
Chickens?
Okay, flock of chickens.
Chickens? What?
Hens. So, anyway, this rooster would actually attack you. And we were pretty small. We were probably 5, 6 years old. My brother's a year older. So, we would have to be careful walking around the farm because this rooster would be hiding behind one of the buildings, and it would come out at you, and then when it got near you, it would fly up and try to peck you in the face. A very dangerous bird. And so in the morning, my brother and I would want to go down to the garage because all our toys and things were down at the garage, and but we'd kind of come out the front door and would be on the porch, and then would make our way down the steps, and then would peer around the corner because we're looking for this rooster to see where it might be hiding out. So then we'd start walking down towards the garage because there was no sign of the rooster. But after a while, you would start hearing these footsteps in the grass behind you and kind of these wings going. Well, if you turned around and looked at it and pointed at it, it would stop and it would peck the ground and pretend that it was there the whole time and it hadn't moved.
Have you guys ever seen I think it's SCP-173 where it won't move if you're looking at it, but the second you look away it starts moving? That's what it was. It's just SCP-173.
So we'd turn our backs on it and we'd start walking towards the garage. But outside the garage, we had this bathtub that we had turned into a fort, where it was we had sticks, coming out of the bathtub, and we had it covered, and there was cardboard around and shower curtains and various other things we'd use to make the fort. And that's where we're heading, is to the platform in front of the garage. Well, this rooster would get bolder and bolder, and after a while, it wouldn't do any good to turn around and look at it, because if you turned around too late, it would fly up in your face and peck at you. So what we would do when we got about halfway down there, we'd run for dear lives. We'd take off as fast as we could, and that rooster was right behind us. it was on our tail, and you could feel it because you were kicking it as you were going because it was actually pecking at your feet and at your shoes, and it was trying to, punch a hole into you with its beak. That thing was dangerous as could be. So we'd get down to the garage and we'd jump into the fort, and we'd say, "Oh, safe, we made it." But meanwhile, that rooster was doing guard duty, and it would walk around looking for an opening, and it would circle, and we're cowering in there, and every once in a while would peer out, and sure enough, that mean old chicken was still there waiting for us. So we'd have to sometimes sit in there for hours, waiting for that thing to get tired of, coming after us, and it would go away and look for something to eat, and then we could get out and play and do things. Well, whatever finally happened to that mean old rooster, we had this family across the street from us, and they had 6 kids too, and we used to play with them all the time. And so we're about the same ages, and but one of them was young, kind of like my brother, the same age as my younger brother.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, and he was over, and he didn't probably know too much about that rooster, but that rooster went after
Knew a
him.
lot about him.
Yeah, and it went after him, and it pecked him right across the top of the eye, right on his eyebrow, and cut him to pieces, right across the eyebrow. Well, of course, he had to have stitches, and he was bleeding all over the place, and it was just horrible. So, what do you think?
Bleeding everywhere. Got blood
What do
all
you
over.
think my mom does? She
What do you reckon? Go on, guys. Leave it in the comments.
yeah, she
This is an interactive podcast.
she goes and gets her axe, and my mom was big. She was a farmer's daughter, so she was quite capable. She got a hold of that axe, and she went after that chicken, and she finally cornered it, and she grabbed it, and she brought it over to the stump, and she took that axe and she chopped its head off right there on the spot. Well, the thing got away from her after her head was off, and that chicken flapped around the yard.
Chicken with its head cut off.
Totally. It was just like in the cartoons. No head, but that chicken flapping around the yard scared the dickens out of us. Of course,
You seen like Family Guy? There's the one episode where Peter blows the chicken's head off.
well, this thing lived for quite some time, if you can call that living.
It's living.
Flapping around in the yard and blood spouting from its neck, and would be running from it. It'd dart from one part to the other, and it was like the thing was following you still. It was just as scary as can be. So after the thing finally settled down a bit, she takes it and she hangs it from the clothesline by its feet. Lets the blood drain out of it, and then she gets some boiling water and she plucks all the she soaks it in there and then plucks the feathers out. So now we got this giant rooster that she's gonna put in the oven after she guts it. And she did that, and we then see the rooster on our plate, and it's all it's a great big giant bird. It's like a small turkey. That thing was just huge.
Like I'd say it's probably more like a large chicken.
Very large, yeah, very very large chicken leg. If you can see some of those that you get at the Food Lion, well,
whatever you guys happen to have.
Walmart.
Walgreens or not Walgreens.
So we got salt and pepper and all the spices, and we had potatoes and everything. And so we're ready to chow down on this chicken because we didn't let anything go to waste. You couldn't eat that chicken. That bird was tougher than anything you'd ever seen in your
Try
life.
to take a bite of it, it's like
It was absolutely impossible
you ever
to
tried to eat
eat.
a tire, guys?
So we didn't eat it. We couldn't. It was just a tough old bird, and it lost its head. And that's the story of the fearful rooster. We were just so afraid of that thing, and for good reason, as you can see. So that is that story. Now, where do we stand?
We still got time.
Okay.
Whatever you can come up with, whatever you got. I mean, give it to them. They're gonna love these.
Well, we had other things happen.
Oh my God! I just thought of one, but I lost it. It was Oh.
How about the monsters under your bed? I'll tell that one.
You tell that one, and then we'll get a secondary guest on.
Okay, so. All right, let me tell you about this one.
Then tell them about the spinach.
Oh yeah, the farmhouse that we lived in was kind of under renovation. It's a very old house. It had been built during the Revolutionary War by a Prussian soldier, who had come back from the war. The
You
one,
should probably explain what the Prussians are, because a lot
yeah,
of people aren't familiar
the
with
Prussians were mercenaries hired by the British to fight the Americans, and so they had different groups of them. Those from Prussia and those from Hesse, the state of Hesse.
Hessians.
They were called the Hessians, right? But they were Germans, and we actually had some Germans on our side. Von Stucker, forget his name. He was General Washington's drill master, and so we had a few that were on the American side, but mostly they were fighting for the British. But when the war was over, some of them decided to stay because they liked it here in America, and so this person built a house, a stockade type house, with raw unfinished logs, and that was part of it. But the other part was more modern. And anyway, there was parts of the house that were just totally unfinished, and one of them was our bedroom, which was open to the attic, and so naturally there was rodents and other animals and whatever. But fortunately, we were pretty well protected because we had cats, pretty big cats, and two of them in particular, Snowball, and then another one that was black and white. And they stayed in the house. They came and went, as they pleased. And but one thing that we had learned, in fact, my father used to teach it to us, is that when you go to bed at night, you tuck the blankets and the sheets around you, and that's being called tucked in. And you kind of almost like a mummy, and it keeps you, relatively warm on cold winter nights. And it also protects you from other things
because mummies care so much about being warm.
Like monsters under the bed. Well, we of course believed in monsters, and we knew surely that they were around. So one night, we hear this very strong growling, and it's so loud, and you never ever would hang your foot off the side of the bed. You could not do that because, after all, that monster would grab you. Well, this was a real monster, and it was a fight going on underneath the bed, and we were just terrified of it. And we're wrapped up and totally, cocooned in our blankets, waiting to see who's going to win this fight. Well, we didn't know what was going on. At night, it was so black. You imagine blackness where you can't see your hand in front of your face. There's no lights. Maybe a slight moon some nights coming through the window. A little bit of moonlight, a little bit of starlight. But on other nights, cloudy. It was dark and pitch. Well, this is one of those pitch dark nights. And there wasn't a lick of light, and you wouldn't dare get out of bed. You couldn't. You could stumble around, but would you get out of bed when all this growling and fighting and snarling and hissing and it's all going on just right underneath you, and you're just sitting there shivering and hoping that it'll end? Well, we finally did fall asleep, and the next morning we got on investigating. The daylight monsters tend to be a little bit less scary. So we looked under the bed. There was this hugest rat you've ever seen. And apparently it had an all-out battle with one of our cats that night right under the bed. And that's what all the snarling, growling, and hissing was about, was this rat and this cat going off after each other. So there you have it, folks. Another episode. Hope you all enjoyed the story. It's all true. Have a good day. Good to see you again.
As always, if it's your birthday, happy birthday. If it's not, well, it sucks to be you. If you're in your car, put your phone down, put your seatbelt on. What the hell are you doing? Stay safe out there, and I will catch you guys in tomorrow's episode, where we're probably going to do more family stories.